Hello, and welcome to this edition of the Leadership and Retention Lab. I'm Julie Teal with Teal Talent Strategy, and I am just so happy to have Chelsea Hamilton here. So, welcome, Chelsea. Great to have you.
Thanks for
Great to have
having me.
you. And
So good to
there
be
has
here.
been there's been a ton of interest in this topic. It's been really fun to see how many people have registered to be part of this event. And as I'm saying that, I'm going to make sure I pull up the chat so that as we're going, if you're watching us live and you'd like to ask questions, please don't hesitate. We'll respond to those and I'll keep an eye on the chat as we go. So welcome to those of you joining us live. And this is Beyond the Paycheck, what compensation can and can't do for retention. So Chelsea, could you tell us introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself so that we can get to know you better?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Chelsea Hamilton. I lead the compensation practice at Hare & Palmer, which is part of Brown & Brown. Been a part of this team for over 7 years now. I'm located on the western slope of Colorado, although I was born and raised in North Carolina. North Carolina has all of our snow this year, I think.
Yes, we were just talking about that. Yeah. And, along those lines, then we met previously. We met, gosh, how many years ago was it? Maybe
4 or 5?
4 or 5 years ago. That's right.
Mhm.
So I was leading HR. I knew we had a gap when it came to compensation structure. And that's when the market was really hot. And we were just wanting to check in to see how competitive we were as an organization. And your organization came in, worked with our leaders, built great relationships, and helped us get a lot of peace of mind about how we had structured compensation. So we've stayed in touch since, which is amazing. And one of the things that I really appreciate about you, Chelsea, is that you're able to take a topic like compensation, which can be technical and can be emotional, okay, kind of both things. And you're able to talk about it in a practical application type of way. So I have always appreciated that about you, Chelsea. And I knew that bringing you in to talk to small business owners, which is really the focus of this session, would be really be able to help small business owners understand this topic, because I think there's a lot of emotion around it, and it can be a little overwhelming, I think, for your average business owner to think about. So so I'm
It's
sure.
funny. I think
What
a
do
lot
you
of
see
times
on that?
a
Go
lot
ahead.
of times when people talk about compensation, they'll say, I'm sure you've heard people say it's an art and a science, and
Yeah.
debatable a lot of times. What I hear the art described as the calibration. Sometimes people hear art and they're like, oh, okay, so the science is where you pull the data. The art is where you override it and do what you want, right? That's
Yeah.
the employer perception of that a lot of times. And so really, to me, when I think about the science of compensation, data and the technical pieces absolutely apply, but psychology is one of the huge scientific parts of it. And I think one of the things that excites me most about our conversation today is a lot of the survey data and things that I've been reading about are about the vast majority of organizations that don't believe their compensation programs play a role in engagement and retention. And anytime I hear that, it's like my brain explodes. It's
That's
like, what do you
wild.
mean? But right, and what a missed opportunity. And so I think, again, if you're thinking about it from the what behaviors are we trying to drive, and what are we tapping into that people value, what makes them feel like they're a part of the organization, and how do we position this in a way to where it can influence behaviors and drive business outcomes. Of course, compensation is one of the best avenues to do that. And so it's not just the how much, it's the how. So I'm really excited to peel back all the layers together.
Absolutely. And with that, let's jump in. So, what role do you see compensation playing with employee retention? So we know there's a connection. What do you see in the work you do with businesses? Because I know you work with so many that are asking that question.
Yeah, so I would say compensation plays a big role in that. It's obviously one of the primary reasons people are working, right? Is to get the paycheck, to pay their bills, to
Sure.
maintain a certain lifestyle, to provide for their family. And so, that being said, I view it more as a box that has to be checked. You don't have to pay the most out of everyone, but you have to be able to play ball. And then there are so many other things that serve as differentiators. That being part of Brown and Brown, we talk about compensation and benefits being the two things that you have to, again, be in the ballpark. You can't have horrible benefits, and especially if you also are trailing the market with your pay. You've
Sure.
got to be in the ballpark, and then all of the other things, the nice to haves, those land better and matter. So if you're underpaying but you have this strong culture of connection, and you're touting the family environment, none of that lands
Sure.
well when fundamentally people believe they're underpaid.
Sure, sure. I think of it like a foundation. Like you have to have a solid foundation in place when you're talking about pay, when you're talking about benefits. If that's
Yeah,
shaky, it's really hard to build on it with other things that will
absolutely.
retain people. So it's definitely kind of the foundation to build on. And
Mhm.
something that's why it's so important. And I don't know that it's an area that most owners or leaders feel comfortable. So, because one of the things that comes up is this idea of
Mhm.
competitiveness. Like you said, you have to be able to play ball, you have to be competitive. And I guess if you could go a little deeper on what does that mean to you? How would you, when someone says, I want to be competitive, like, what do you do with that as a consultant working with businesses so often?
Yeah, I think it's such a big question. And we have a little joke on our team. We'll talk about this notion of a magical market unicorn, right? Because a lot of times we'll get questions of, "Hey, can you just tell me really quickly what the market is for this job?" And the unpopular but honest truth is it depends, right? We have to take a step back. We've got to define our market. And that's going to be unique for every organization. But when you think about how you communicate about pay, and how pay transparency is becoming more and more of a priority, I
Mhm.
feel like it all comes back to starting first with how do we define our market, so the data, the structures, all to stand in. Where do we start, and what does that represent? So it's about first asking the question of who are we? So if you go back in time to where, we had fewer salary databases and more of just point in time published reports, usually what people would do is say, oh, okay, we have 400 employees. There's a data cut here that says, 250 to 500. That's what we're going to look at. Here's the region we're located in. That's what we're going to look at. It's really not that simple. You
Mhm.
should be thinking about, obviously, your company identity,
Mhm.
but it's also about who are you competing with. And sometimes that's as simple as, there's these other companies that do similar work in our location.
Mhm.
Sometimes there's this handful of remote employers that, even though we don't have remote work, they're trying to steal our IT folks or
Sure.
our HR folks, right?
Yeah.
That's a real thing. And so it almost flips even geographic location upside down to a certain degree. And at the bottom of your pay scale, at your most entry level jobs, that's one of the biggest places I have seen challenges across our clients in recent years, particularly in nonprofits. So think
Interesting.
about a rescue mission who has program assistants out there working on the front lines, shelter associates, and they may have historically paid them a certain amount
Sure.
to do that job. And now you've got fast food or retail saying,
Yes.
hey, we're going to pay $22 an hour for a much less stressful job.
Sure.
And so it sounds like a simple thing to just, hey, let's choose our data cuts, but it takes a lot of soul searching. It takes a lot of looking at the data and saying, well, here's the ones we'd like to use. we see the data and what it's telling us, which ones can we actually use, and how do we use that to inform our communication strategy and how we share that out with employees?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I have to ask you, can you trust online data? How do you handle
You're trying
that?
to get me in trouble,
Sorry.
Julie.
Had to ask a hard question.
Yeah, it's funny because we get those questions even about credible survey data, right? And so what I would answer that by saying it's really important with any data, whether it's free data from your online search or whether it is survey data. It's really important to understand what is informing that data. Where did it come from? So who's participating? And not just who's participating, meaning what data is submitted, but who is submitting it. Now that means
Sure.
which companies, but it also means, is it a job holder that's like, can I go in and say, hey, here's what I, Chelsea Hamilton, make for this job title? And who's checking that? And that is one of the shortfalls that often comes with some of the free resources that are available online, is the methodology or the integrity of the data. But even, at the end of the day, salary data is, you could argue that it's imperfect. I would maybe say each data set tells a different story. And even within the data set, the data cuts. And so a lot of times our clients will have questions about, well, how could it be true that this one survey says the market value of a job is this, but another one has a 25% difference? And that's where you have to ask yourself, well, how do we cut the data? What participating organizations are submitting into it? And those will account for some of the differences. And so, true, survey data is information to help companies make decisions. And the free data you're mentioning that is often out there visible to employees, that's what's going to prompt the questions. And so that's where your foundational understanding, like it or not, transparency and this moment of information at our fingertips has arrived. So the best thing businesses can do, no matter how small or big, is make an intentional decision around their comp strategy and make sure everyone understands it, so that they're speaking the same language, the same processes.
That's right. And I would say, this is true with about any data that you have access to now today. You can Google things, you can use AI, but you always have to question the source, no matter what it is. And so
100%.
those free surveys, I've always, advised managers myself, you have to ask more questions about where it comes from. And what you get from working with someone like you that's got the experience, the background, and just has worked with so many companies, is you have access to resources that they're just more credible. I mean, to your point, they've been vetted, they've been reviewed, and that's a lot of the value that I know you were able to provide us was, this is where you're going to find the best source of information to make these compensation decisions and comparisons. So I just wanted to bring that up because I know everyone's had an employee walk in and say, well, this resource says I should be making this. And it is a hard position as a manager to be in, to respond to that. I feel for people.
For so many reasons. I feel like on top of just questioning the credibility of the data, depending on what they're looking at, and it could more and more often, that is being less so data sets and more so job postings with salary ranges on them. And the tricky part with that is we don't know what portion of the salary range we're even seeing from most organizations. We don't know where they're hiring people at, right? They might be hiring people in at the bottom of the range. One thing I know for certain, after 7 years and some change in consulting, the same job title can mean 100 different things at 100 different companies. And so it really is about figuring out the nature of the work.
The actual duties, not the title. The work someone's doing. Absolutely. So In organizations where things are working well, how does compensation tend to fit into that bigger picture of the employee experience? So when it's done well, what does that look like?
I would say the how matters as much as the how much. So I have seen both reported in surveys, but also firsthand the explanation, I would say, and the logic behind it, insight kind of behind the veil to the
Mhm.
process, and even just knowing that there is a process and some intention going into it
Sure.
goes a long way. People will accept even a message that they don't like. They're more open to
Mhm.
accepting it when they understand the thought process, the logic, the data that went into it.
Sure.
So I offer that
Mhm.
to say every company in the long game, they're gonna have ups, they're gonna have downs. They're gonna have years where they're, you know,
Sure.
super successful and other years where things might be a little tighter. I think having a structure that allows you to adapt and kind of be nimble, regardless of which part of the wave we're on, also allows
Mhm.
you to speak with intention about it to your employees. And I think the clients that we see that get compensation right, they're not necessarily paying at the top of the pay scale. I actually would say the opposite.
Sure.
Most of them set their structures to meet the middle of the market.
Mhm.
And so they're kind
Okay.
of just doing what most others are doing. Um,
Mhm.
but they communicate about it well because
Sure.
if
Okay.
if you do all this great work and you don't communicate it proactively, you don't explain it to people, you might as well have not done it, honestly, because your employees are
Sure.
not going to recognize it and assume and say, "Oh, well, I think they probably pay me maybe too much." That's not
Yeah.
the way that it
Nobody says
works.
that. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Um, I want to also go. Okay, we've jumped into a few topics. I want to kind of go to one of the controversial ones, which is counter offers. So
Mm,
someone decides to leave. They put in notice. You love that person. It's so tempting to want to say, okay, that new company offered you this. I'll offer you this and do a counter offer. And I've worked for companies that do it. I've worked for companies that are against it. And I really just wanted to have a conversation with you about this topic because, again, it's so hard when you're in that seat and you're about to lose someone that you really, really think is amazing. So, my question is, from your experience, do counter offers work? What works better? Kind of take us through your
yeah.
observations on that.
Well, so all the data that I have seen would suggest that it doesn't work, that they don't work because it's kind of a too little too late. So they might work
Mhm.
temporarily. It might
Sure.
score you a little bit of extra time. People are always happy to get a pay increase, especially if it means they
Mhm.
don't have to face a big change. So
Sure.
if compensation is truly the driver of why someone wants to leave and you offer them money to stay temporarily, it's like, okay, box checked,
Yeah.
problem
Mhm.
solved.
Sure.
And then you sit and think about it for a while and they're like, well, why did I have to threaten to leave to get paid
Yes.
what I'm worth? And so
Mhm.
it quickly turns into something that can be again generating resentment, questions, lack of
Mhm.
understanding. And so to a certain degree, I mean, I can say even in recent years, there were times where the offers for jobs were crazy and they you couldn't compete with some of them. And
Sure.
I had to sit in this seat as a consultant, probably feeling less helpful than I would like to be, right? But saying, listen, you have to stay the course. That is not a sustainable path to pay this job double because it's not worth
Sure.
double. I know
Sure.
this company down the street is paying double right now, but they can't do that forever. And
Sure.
so and that's not a great answer when someone is taking this massive increase to go across the street. But what we've seen in some of those cases is that those are some of the same companies that ended up doing either pay freezes, in most cases, pay cuts, reductions in force.
Sure.
So I offer that to say I think the best thing you can do is strike the right balance of market competitiveness with a structure that is also fiscally responsible and sustainable,
Sure.
and
Mhm.
audit on a regular basis for things like shifts in the market, right? So
Mhm.
you should be looking at the market and also vetting that against your boots on the ground experience. If there are
Sure.
places that seem like they're
Mhm.
experiencing a spike, and you can look at data over time to see and measure, is it a temporary spike or is this our new norm? Is this where it's going to stay?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
react appropriately and follow that through to compression. I think the biggest issue, kind of going back to where we started with this,
Yeah.
we were saying that compensation reportedly is not working for engagement and retention. It's because people think about it when they're trying to steal somebody to get them in the door, and then it goes into autopilot. And
Sure.
so you'll see places where someone brand new costs more than someone who's been doing that
Mhm.
same job for you for 10
Mhm.
years. And all that tells me is if my 10-year person leaves to make more money, which they can, right? We
They
know, but
can.
guess what
Yes.
we have to pay to get the new person in the door? I'm going to have to pay more to get someone else that doesn't have any of that experience. And so
Mhm.
that's where those intentional audits essentially and
Sure.
check-ins to market will make sure that these types of things aren't happening outside of some of those hopefully weird and in the past circumstances we've seen of wild pay offers in the market. We have definitely seen those simmer in the last year or so.
Oh, yes, it has changed. I mean, we've gone from a candidate-friendly market to a employer-friendly market.
Mhm.
So it'll swing back again. It always does. I mean, the
Always does.
economy will continue to swing back and forth. But to your point, that's where having that kind of anchoring in a plan, anchoring
Yeah,
in a strategy really does pay off. Because to your point, you can always choose to pay someone more, you can always choose to pay someone less when you're bringing them in the door, but you need to have a relative plan. And there
mhm.
are consequences and trade offs to every decision. So,
Not the
that
truth.
decision, if you don't keep your experienced people slowly moving forward, they are going to get passed over by the new person coming in, just the
Mhm.
way math works, right? I mean, they will, just the way that it works. So,
Yeah,
being conscious and reviewing not only new hires, but your experienced people regularly. And I am such a fan of regular pay increases, like every year, reviewing pay, giving people rewards, keeping them moving on the progression.
absolutely.
That's really important. I mean, and I think sometimes that gets lost in the excitement of bringing in new people.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, man. I feel like that topic alone could be its own episode or
Mhm.
series even because there's there's so much chatter around, annual increases versus are they COLA based or are they performance based?
Mhm.
And is
Sure.
merit really the place to address top performance?
Mhm.
Or is that more of an incentive thing? And what if we
Yeah.
don't have incentives? But again, all of those conversations, it comes down to who are we as an organization? What do we do?
Mhm.
What can we offer? And what type of plan, compensation, and everything else, what kind of plan do we design that's going to attract the type of people that
That's
we want
right.
and that we need to work here? And so to me, that's where it starts philosophically is what types of talent, what types of people, what skill sets do we need? What soft skills, by the way, the
Sure, sure.
untrainables, what and what's going to resonate with those folks and how do we design our programs to attract and then keep them engaged and keep them
Mhm.
feeling like when they do well and we all do well, everybody reaps the benefits.
That's right. That's right. So good. Such good insight. Like you said, there's so many ways we could go with this. Where I wanted to go next is to talk about, this idea of small businesses trying to compete or not feeling like they can compete with larger businesses. And
Mhm.
lots of times when I'm talking to owners and small businesses, they just feel like, well, these big companies have these big salaries that we can't compete with. And, what have you seen work well for employers who don't try to win on salary alone? 'Cause that's a little bit of what we've been talking about, but I want to really dial in on that. on that question?
Yeah. So my team and I really work with a lot with smaller organizations. And when I say smaller,
Mhm.
I mean as small as 20 or 30 people, but a lot of times in the few hundreds. And what that often looks or translates to us hearing from this, particularly around career progression. You know, my team is 4
Okay.
people. It's
Yeah.
really hard to create opportunity. You know, someone else has to leave before, and it does all start with a business need, right? So what's
Sure.
happening is that you have somebody who does a job for 3 years, and you know, on 3 years and one day we call them something higher, we pay them a little bit more, their job is the same. It kind of goes back to the same idea when we were talking about counter offers, right? It's like, well, should
Sure.
you have been paying me this the it doesn't really work. However, there are ways to grow people in place. I think one of the best
Mhm.
things about small organizations and small teams is the exposure that you get to so many different things.
Sure.
And often this ability to be nimble, be creative. A lot of times, our smaller clients don't have the same level of red tape or layers of approval that
Mhm.
you have to get first.
Yeah.
It's more of just
Sure.
this creative and flexible dynamic environment where you can have unique and creative ideas. You can run with them. And again,
Mhm.
this idea of most positions are wearing multiple hats. So you might have, I don't know, an accounts payable person, an accounts receivable person, and an accounting clerk on a team at a bigger
Yeah.
company, maybe probably way more than that, right? But that could be one person at one of these smaller
Yes.
organizations, and it
Yes.
gives them
And they may
such
do
broad
payroll.
yeah, yeah, right,
A little bit of everything.
and.
Yeah.
It's that last
Yeah.
bullet of, like,
Exactly.
other duties as assigned, which means the
Yes,
sky
of
is the
course.
limit.
For
Yeah, so I
sure.
think those are huge advantages.
Mhm. Mhm. It's almost like you're not only hiring for skill, but you're hiring for that willingness to jump in and help as needed. I mean, it feels like in a
Mhm.
smaller organization, at least the ones I work with, you're looking for people that are self-motivated, and that really enjoy that. And they're not necessarily going to be the right fit for a big structured organization. It's almost like the people that are attracted to small business are almost a different profile than
Yeah,
larger businesses. So I think it's almost like, to your point, you have to really define that unique value proposition that you have as an employer
mhm.
and be ready to talk about it. Hey, Joe
Yes.
over there got to work directly with a client, and then he got to go sell, and then he put some marketing together, and he did the whole thing, right?
Yeah,
And that story is going to be really attractive to the right
absolutely.
person. So,
Absolutely. And I think that's something that comes up a lot that we are faced with. I was going to say challenged with, but maybe it's both. Because of the size of the organizations we tend to work with, it's something we hear all the time of the fill in the blank
mhm,
employer that is massive and their budgets are different, their resources are greater, and so on. But the job is different, right?
yeah,
I mean, if you use HR as an example, what does it mean to be an HR director as
mhm.
part of an HR team of 2 at a smaller
Yes,
company
yes,
compared
yes.
to one of many, many HR directors and probably senior directors and VPs and SVPs at a bigger company. The job looks wildly different. And to your point, what attracts somebody to that in one environment might be what turns them away from the alternative. And so it's like if
Mhm.
you're that team of 2 director, you're probably getting your hands dirty and
Yeah.
doing some of the work while also setting the strategy of that work. And maybe that's what
Mhm.
makes you love it. Or maybe you're like, mm-mm, I don't want to be hands-on with this. I really want to drive the vision, the strategy, and get work done through a team of people. And those are the
Yes.
things that again aren't specific to compensation. It's more about what is the
Mhm.
job doing. But I also think that distinction is important when you're having conversations with employees about pay, and what they might be seeing on the job posting out there
Sure.
that has a
Sure.
higher range at the other company. It's helping people understand, listen, here's what that job is like compared to
Yeah.
your job here and why it's different. And by the way, we did this market study and we look at it every year. Here's our structure, here's
Yeah.
how we define your market, and here's how we value you based off of all this due
Mhm.
diligence that we did, and
Mhm.
you have confident answers. I still think it comes down to informed data-based decision frameworks, and then making sure that it's not just, hey, go ask Julie. I'm sorry that you have a question about pay, but go ask HR. It's that everybody understands it, everybody's bought into it, and you've got alignment and everybody, on the same page, standing
Sure.
in our process because they believe in it.
That's right. That's right. So there has to be that manager, anyone who's leading in the organization has to understand what you're doing with pay and why, for sure,
Mhm.
to be able to own it and speak to it. I wanted to
Yeah.
do a quick hello to Rick Copeland, who's out there. He's watching and weighed in with a comment. So here's what Rick had to say. Counter offers never work. You've effectively asked for, he said, a work divorce. Yes. And there's someone else in the picture that you've already started dating.
Right.
Well, that's a great way to look at the leaving one job for another. Impossible to rebuild the necessary and required trust. No, Rick, that's a
100%.
great way to look at it. It is a work divorce when you leave a company. And
I feel like I don't know if I want to steal that analogy for future client meetings, or if that might if that
yeah.
might hurt. It makes a ton of sense. I wholeheartedly agree, and it's the funny thing is, I had a leadership interview with a client this morning, and count their strategy. One of the things that we're about to help them solve is that they
Mhm.
shared their strategy is that, workplace divorce. It's waiting for the counters, and that's what people have been trained to say. All right,
Okay.
well,
Yeah.
they might go and interview somewhere else with no plan of even leaving. It's just to get the offer to bring it back and say, well,
Oh,
here's what I can
sure.
make there, match it, or I'm going to leave. Which, again, I am all about creating trust and, proactivity. And to me, it just
Mhm.
feels so unhealthy, unproductive, toxic. It's, cultivating resentment when people feel like it's employees in those
Mhm.
scenarios feel like they have to force the hand of their employer to get what they deserve.
Sure.
And if
Sure.
that's the tone, we've got an issue, right? Because
Yes.
as an employer, what we see from clients is a lot of times it's by accident. It's people are too busy, or there's not a process in place, whatever it may
Yeah.
be. By accident, people fall behind, but the message that they receive is very different. The best thing you can do is be proactive about it, because the
Mhm.
damage control and the workplace divorces don't end well for anyone.
Exactly. No, Rick, thank you so much. That's a great perspective. You got us laughing and nodding
Yes.
along at the same time. So I like to make sure that in these sessions we're always giving business owners, we're kind of getting to some practical things they can do. And I would like to hear from you two things. First of all, what's one thing leaders should stop doing around compensation? And what's one thing they should start doing this year around compensation? So, interested in the actions that you'd recommend.
So one thing to stop doing, I think my number one would be what I kind of just made about, which is directing or essentially blaming HR or your comp team for pay decisions, whatever those pay decisions are.
Mm.
Actually, I was watching the pay practitioners panel on LinkedIn right now. There's a handful of really awesome comp folks
Okay.
that are being on there. I think it's bi-weekly, and I wrote down the quote from one of the guys who was on there, and he said, if our pay to survive scrutiny, it's not really a Tracy problem, it's a leadership failure. And I
Mm.
fluttered, I think, when I heard it, because I wholeheartedly we're making decisions that are rooted in data, that are part of a consistent practice that ensures equity, fairness, and market competitiveness. And that
Mhm.
doesn't mean people are always going to love it. People are always going to want to be paid more, by the way, as well. And there will always be a job
Sure.
posting out there amongst the others that are also lower than what they're paid, right? But we don't see those as
Exactly.
often. And so I feel like something to stop doing is hiding behind HR. I think
Sure.
it's an opportunity for leadership to take ownership. And honestly, that's the only way that this works.
Mhm. Mhm. Very good. What about
And
starting
then
something? Yeah.
I would say figure out your organizational values and scream them from the rooftops and let them inform everything that you do, right? So if
Sure.
I say that our values are, family first, job
Mhm.
second, and then I give you an unrealistic workload, or I give you
Sure.
a benefit plan where it's not affordable for anyone with a family, to actually
Mhm.
enroll in that plan and take care of their family members. It's mixed messaging, right? And I think that this is something that our company actually does really, really well.
Mhm.
I have to give a shout out to our benefits breakdown podcast. It's one of my favorite things to listen to. And our Brown and Brown teammates actually had our CEO on the other week.
Nice.
And it was really cool to listen to him talk about just this specific thing. So our core values. It's kind of funny given the landscape of this conversation, because essentially what he said was, obviously Brown and Brown is a huge company. We're
Yeah.
international at this point. We've got people all over and people doing lots of different work. But one of the things he said was, we're a big company that tries to operate like a small company.
Mhm.
And I think that
Yeah.
comes back to some of the advantages we've been talking about. And he basically said the reason and how this works for us is because we're all aligned to the same core values. And I can tell you, last year I got the opportunity to go to a leadership challenge training. It's an internal training that we do at Brown and Brown that you can be nominated for. And so I was there with about 20 other folks who I had never met before,
Okay.
which scares me, by the way. It makes me so nervous to be somewhere where I don't know anyone. And I feel like within a span of the first hour, it felt like I had known these people forever, because we all value the same things. We show up in similar ways. And it was just this instant connection. And so that's where I say, longevity and stickiness of employment, I think, comes from
Mhm.
connection, commitment to the same values. And the only way you can attract people that value the same things is if you identify what those things are and you
Sure.
share
Yeah.
that to people.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about it kind of from a woo-woo sense
No,
almost
no,
in some
it
ways,
makes sense.
but it's also like the people who really value fully in-person work. If you're trying to hire someone who really wants to be fully remote, and that's never part
Mhm.
of your plan, then that's probably not the best fit, right? Even if they're
Sure.
super qualified, that's
Sure.
a deal breaker to a certain degree. And so I would say decide on your core values, be intentional and make sure you're practicing what you preach,
Mhm.
for a lack of a better way to say it. Um, and you will be able to feel the impact of that.
Sure, sure. It's easy to, I mean, you have to do it to really understand it. I mean, I've worked in organizations like you described where they lead with their values, and there is a feel to that and
Yeah.
authenticity to that when that's
Yeah.
been identified and communicated. And it
Mhm.
does back up every other leadership decision you make when values are clear. So
Mhm.
so as an action, there is a lot of benefits, compensation and otherwise, to defining values and being very, very direct about them, which is great. I want to do a quick acknowledgement. Kathy asked a question about compensation negotiation in the job offer process, which I think unfortunately we don't have time to get into today because that could almost be another
On topic.
live show. So Kathy, that's a tough question. So what I'll do though, Kathy, is I will connect you with Chelsea through the DMs afterwards. And maybe
Okay.
if you're willing, Chelsea, just kind of weigh in on
Yeah.
that. So Kathy gets
Let's
her
talk about it.
question answered. So I'm just making sure I've got it all. So Kathy, thank you for the question. So I wanted to, because again, we're kind of nearing the end of our time together. So if a company wants to start working with you or explore these ideas further, how do they get a hold of you? Who do you work with? So let people know how they can reach out and learn more.
Yeah. So I would say you're welcome, of course, to reach out to me through LinkedIn. I keep it pulled up all day, every day, and I get the notifications on my phone, and I am a notification clearer, so I will see it. Um, or you can reach out through the Hare and Palmer website. You can send me an email, or if you're working with or connected with anyone at Brown and Brown in your region, you can reach out to them and they can connect us as well. So again, I'm part of the compensation team within Hare and Palmer that is a Brown and Brown company.
Great, great, excellent. And if you're interested as a small business owner in getting HR off your plate, I don't want any business owner up at 3 a.m. worried about pay, performance issues, goal setting, any of those things. That's the work that I love to do, and I love to get it off your plate. So you can get a hold of me, and let's talk about the HR Essentials product. It's a new offering I have, a new service that's really designed for businesses with 20 people or less. And of course, I can help on a lot of issues, but that small business owner is really where I find the most fun these days. So thank you, Chelsea. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being part of the show. It was fun to it's been fun for us to reconnect anyway. And really fun to have this conversation today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I could talk about these things all day.
And we love doing it. So anyway, take care. Thank you, Chelsea.
Yeah, thanks everybody.